since there was most of the family that was affected, my mom was feeling very horrified. She thought she was going to lose all of her daughters and her son-in-law and some grandchildren.
We had an outbreak about a year ago where quite a few people were involved, and they had all eaten stinky heads.
People die from it, and people have died in the past and will probably die in the future from it.
These people are talking about a serious disease caused by one of the deadliest poisons there is. And while this disease occurs all over the world, it occurs more often in Alaska than anywhere else in the United States. In this program, the doctors, nurses, and health aides who've treated people with this disease will discuss the most up-to-date facts. You'll learn what the symptoms are like, what causes it, who can get it, and what type of treatment is used. But most importantly, you'll learn how you can give a helping hand and keep your family safe from botulism. Botulism is a poison produced by a very tiny germ that can only be seen through a microscope. The germ is called Clostridium botulinum, and while there are several ways of getting botulism, almost all botulism in Alaska is from eating food contaminated with botulism poison.
Since 1950, Alaska has had more than 200 people with botulism. More than 20 of these have died. In fact, Alaska has more botulism than any other state in the country. People have usually gotten botulism from eating traditional Alaska native foods, especially fermented foods like fish, seal, and whale. In the past, about 5 people each year would get botulism, but since 1985, the number of cases each year seems to be increasing. There are probably several reasons for the increase. First, doctors and other healthcare providers may be better at recognizing the symptoms of botulism, and so we may be finding more people with mild cases that were not recognized in the past. The second reason for the increase in the number of cases of botulism is that people are now using glass and plastic more often to ferment foods. These types of containers do not allow air to circulate and create an ideal situation for the botulism germ to make the poison. So because there are more ideal situations in which the botulism germ can grow, there may be more people getting sick with botulism.
So what does it feel like to have botulism? And how can you help your family recognize the symptoms of this disease?
My worst fear when I had botulism was not getting back to normal because the vision was really bad and my throat was feeling really tight and my whole body felt really weak, and I was afraid that I would not be able to lift my newborn baby again.
The symptoms, they were, I didn't know what was happening, I had these blurred vision and diarrhea and thirsty, and the sun seemed, hazy even though it was in the afternoon. If we had it worse, we'd have been dead, from botulism. That's the biggest worry that was mentioned.
Botulism poison, which is also called toxin, attacks the nerves and makes the muscles weak and difficult to move. This is called paralysis. The paralysis starts with the head and moves down to the arms and legs. Because botulism poison causes paralysis, there can be problems in seeing, speaking, swallowing, and breathing. If the breathing muscles stop working, the patients will need a breathing machine and will be hospitalized for weeks or months, or they could die. Patients with botulism might have any of these problems: blurry vision, double vision, drooping eyelids, slurred speech, trouble swallowing, dry mouth, and trouble breathing. They could also have muscle weakness on both sides of the body, starting at the head and going down to the shoulders, arms, hands, then down to the legs and feet. Many people also have nausea, vomiting, stomachache, or diarrhea. Symptoms usually begin 18 to 36 hours after eating food containing the botulism poison, but they can show up as early as 6 hours or as late as 10 days, depending on how much poison is in the food.
Fever is not a symptom of botulism. It's a symptom of another disease that's going on, but has no relation with botulism. Usually when we get a scare of botulism, we come to the patient's house and check them. And if we suspect botulism, we'd ask for the foods that they ate, and we ask if anybody else in the house had eaten from the same.
And if anybody has eaten from the food that's caused one person to be sick, everybody should be checked. Symptoms vary from person to person. The prompt, quick attention is what can save somebody's life. The sooner you can seek medical care, the sooner the botulism disease could be diagnosed and treated.
The reason for seeing the health aide early on in the symptom process is that she'll make a determination whether it's likely that you have botulism, and there are some medications that can be given that will slow or indeed stop the progression of the toxin in your body.
I think it's always important to keep in mind that the more you know, the more you can benefit yourself and your family. And things like knowing what the signs and symptoms of botulism are could make a difference in someone's life.
Remember that botulism makes the muscles weak and difficult to move. The paralysis starts at the head and moves down to the arms and legs, which causes problems in seeing, speaking, swallowing, and breathing. Many people also have nausea, vomiting, stomachache, or diarrhea. The earlier you recognize the symptoms and the earlier you receive medical treatment, the better your chances of surviving this deadly disease. You can also have a hand in protecting your family's future by finding out what causes botulism. Botulism germs are commonly found in the soil, in water, in fish, and on marine animals. And as a result, we can easily come into contact with the botulism germs. But the germs themselves are harmless, so they're not the problem. What happens is that the germs form a protective coating and become spores. This allows the germs to survive until they are in an ideal situation that can help them grow. But when they grow, they start producing poison, and this poison or toxin is one of the most deadly poisons in the world. Just a teaspoon of pure botulism poison could kill millions of people. These germs grow best and produce their poison when there is no fresh air and when the temperature is above 37 degrees Fahrenheit. Botulism is caused by eating foods that contain the botulism poison, but you can't see it, or smell it, or taste it. So how can you tell if the food contains botulism poison?
The only way to know for sure whether a food contains the botulism poison is through tests that can be performed at the laboratories at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention in Atlanta, Georgia. But it takes several weeks to get the results of those tests. The symptoms of botulism can be very similar to the symptoms of some other diseases. Therefore, if botulism is suspected, it's very important to determine whether or not the poison is in food that has been eaten. So if you think you may have botulism, it's very important not to throw out the food that has been recently eaten. The leftover food can be very valuable for testing to determine whether or not the botulism poison is in the food.
I think the fear of death is immense because we have had people die with botulism. So I think anyone who has the potential of being exposed to the botulism, I think they really need to know that people die from botulism.
Remember, because you can't see, smell, or taste botulism poison, prepare food carefully. This is especially important since anyone can get this disease. So who is most likely to get this disease? Anyone at any age can get botulism, but the only way they get botulism is when they eat food contaminated with botulism poison.
Well, there are many ways that people can get it, but in our Native community, what we are most concerned about are people eating fermented Native foods. Frequently, in the past, what people would do is they would bury their fish heads or their seal flipper or whatever just in the ground. And we didn't have that many cases of botulism. But now people are placing their native foods in either plastic buckets or plastic bags. The botulism just loves that environment.
My two aunties, before they put them beaver tail in a plastic and put them under the stove, warm place, take about 4 days to leave them, then they eat them. Them guys never make it.
We ate stinky heads that were fermented in a plastic bucket and left in an open, not underground, in the hot sun.
Almost all cases of botulism in Alaska are associated with fermented foods like stinky heads, stinky eggs, fermented beaver tail, seal, and walrus. Also, people have gotten sick from eating seal oil and dried unsalted fish.
My mom got sick from seal oil, and many people don't know they could get botulism from seal oil. My mom was lucky to be seen by the doctors early because they caught it. They had enough time to treat her.
More cases of botulism occur in summer because that's when more fermented native foods are prepared and eaten. But people also get it during other parts of the year. In addition, people do not get botulism from another person. Many people eat fermented food and don't get sick, so not all fermented native food contains botulism poison. An experiment conducted by CDC measured botulism poison in fermented fish heads. No botulism poison was found in the fermented fish heads made in the traditional method using a grass-lined hole in the ground. But botulism poison was found in the fermented fish heads made in the modern method using a plastic bucket with a tight-fitting lid that was buried in the ground.
What we found is that making fermented fish heads in plastic containers with tight-fitting lids made an ideal growing situation for the botulism germs. So, if you make fish heads in a plastic container, it seems that your risk of botulism is much higher.
It takes just a tiny bit of botulism to make you sick. So with With a family eating it together can make the whole family sick. It doesn't take very much.
Anyone can get botulism. Even people who've had botulism before can get it again if they eat contaminated food. There seems to be no natural protection from the illness. There are several misunderstandings about botulism. For example, many people believe that freezing food kills botulism poison, when in fact freezing food slows the growth of the germ but doesn't kill the germ or destroy the poison. So once the food is thawed out, if the botulism germs are there, they can continue growing, especially if the food is kept in a warm container or is kept in a plastic container with a tight-fitting lid. The germs can grow and continue to produce poison. Another misunderstanding is that foods like soda pop, fried chicken, and candy cause botulism. Some people believe that modern foods combined with traditional fermented foods can cause botulism. Eating fermented foods and drinking soda pop can cause you to have an upset stomach, but that's not what causes botulism. Botulism is caused by eating any food that contains the botulism poison. It's not the certain combinations that cause botulism. Another misunderstanding is that botulism is caused by chemicals dumped into the water. The truth is that botulism germs live naturally in the soil, in the water, in fish, and in animals. We probably eat botulism germs from time to time, but because the germs don't have that ideal growing situation, they don't make the poison and we don't get sick.
Preservation of culture is extremely important. Culture includes language. It also includes traditional foods and food preparation. By using more traditional methods of preparing food, Alaska Natives can reduce the risk of botulism poisoning.
By preparing food carefully, you can help keep your family and your community safe from botulism. But remember that anyone who eats food that contains botulism poison can get sick. Although preparing fermented food using traditional methods appears to be safer, eating any fermented native food has some risk of botulism. However, if you've eaten food you think made you sick, be sure to save it so it can be tested. So what type of treatment is available if you do get sick? The healing hands of doctors and nurses help protect patients who have botulism. If diagnosed early, they can treat patients with a life-saving medicine called antitoxin.
That's better.
Antitoxin is not kept in most health clinics, but if needed, it can be quickly delivered to a doctor anywhere in the country.
Usually they're given a medication, an antitoxin, when it is first suspected that they might have botulism. And the sooner they get that, the better. It doesn't make everything go away that's already happened, but it makes it so that the toxin that's still in their body and hasn't caused a problem is less likely to cause further problems. We monitor how well their breathing is going, and it's getting worse, so oftentimes we've had to put a tube down into the lungs to help breathe for the person. They are moved into the intensive care unit where we are now, and we keep them on the breathing machine until they're able to support themselves. By a week, they're oftentimes much improved, although things are not resolved. Then he stays in the hospital for another week or so before they're well enough to go home.
If a patient has long-term problems with botulism, frequently they have to be hospitalized at our referral center in Anchorage for extended periods of time. And they may not be able to go back to their village for quite a while. And we know how important families are, and they miss their families.
After botulism, I getting weak, even my hand, even my joints. That's why I quit fishing, I don't work much anymore, I don't eat stinky things after I got sick from that. I don't feel like to eat no more that kind. Because almost cut me,
Home remedies such as taking aspirin, milk, or antibiotics, or drinking seal oil don't make this problem go away. The only treatment that we're aware of is an antitoxin, which you have to get by your health care giver, and then supportive care. We've had much improvement in keeping people alive with botulism. In the 1950s, 1 in 3 people died of botulism, and now approximately 1 in 20 will die. Because people are aware of the symptoms sooner, they're able to present to the health care and get the antitoxin more quickly, and then supportive care as well. And they have an improved survival rate from that. Even though the survival rate with botulism is much better than it was in the past, more people are getting botulism than ever before.
If you think you have botulism poisoning, see your health aide, see your nurse practitioner, seek medical attention rapidly, because the sooner we can treat you, the faster you'll respond and get better.
Fortunately, antitoxin and medical treatment are available for this deadly disease. But how can you prevent your family from ever getting it in the first place? You give your children mittens to prevent them from getting cold in the winter, and you hold their hands to prevent them from getting hit by passing vehicles. And by following 5 food safety tips, you can prevent them from getting botulism.
We know that people get botulism from fermented foods such as stinky heads and stinky beaver tail, and there are many lessons that can be learned from the helping hands of the elders. It has been shown that the older, traditional methods of making fermented foods are much less likely to make the botulism poison than the newer methods of using plastic. So when you prepare your fermented foods, keep these tips in mind. The first tip is to wash your hands, your containers, and your food before you start preparing your food.
By washing your hands with soap and water, you wash away germs that you get from touching a contaminated surface. Also, clean the containers and areas where food will be placed. And wash your food before preparing it. This reduces but does not remove all the germs. These tips are also important steps in preventing other diseases you can get from food.
Second, use proper containers when you prepare your fermented foods.
Use methods that allow the air to circulate. Because botulism grows better when fresh air is not moving around, do not use plastic or glass containers.
My personal opinion, after watching the scene in rural Alaska and in urban Alaska for 35 years, is that the increase in botulism is directly related to the use of glass jars and plastic buckets, etc., to store and to ferment the different fish products. I think that the old traditional methods, although not foolproof, are still much safer than the current methods of storing and preparing the fish products. Where there were more open air containers, they used to use grass baskets versus plastic buckets. The foods were put into the ground rather than stored in glass jars in warm rooms.
Older people, they use grass and moss put them under the ground, leave it there, not in the plastic.
The third tip is to ferment your food at a cold temperature.
Keep food cold by putting it in the ground away from the sun. Ideally, the temperature of the food should be below 37 degrees Fahrenheit. This might take longer to ferment, but it may be safer because if you keep food cold, you prevent botulism poison from developing.
We have to hide them from sun to a little bit cool down there.
So I think people are learning. I've seen few people make fermented fish heads underground now, They keep it in well ventilated and in dark, cool place instead of covering it with the buckets cover so it wouldn't be so tight.
Follow the traditional ways of preparing food. Don't try to use any shortcuts or, get them ready faster, or don't use the plastic containers.
The fourth tip is to boil your food before eating it.
Botulism poison can be destroyed by boiling fermented food for 10 minutes. It might change the taste from what you're used to tasting, but it's one way to protect you and your family from botulism.
If food products are stored in plastic or glass, before they're consumed, they should be boiled, because the botulism cannot be seen, it cannot be smelled, or you cannot tell by tasting it. So boiling will kill the toxin that's in the food product.
The fifth tip is, when in doubt, throw it out.
It's better to throw out food that might be contaminated than it is to eat it and get sick or lose the life of a loved one. But be sure to throw out contaminated food where it can't be eaten by children or pets. Tips to consider when preparing other foods include using salt when drying fish. Salt is a natural preservative and reduces the chance that botulism will grow. Throw out any canned foods with bulging lids because they might contain botulism poison. Know how the food you eat is made. If you are not sure, then don't eat it. Botulism poison is so strong that even a small taste can cause serious problems. In conclusion, wash your hands, containers, and food before you start preparing food. Ferment food using proper methods where the air can circulate and the food is in the ground at a cold temperature. Also, salt your food when drying it. Most importantly, boil fermented food for 10 minutes before you eat it, and when in doubt, throw it out. By following these simple tips, you can give a helping hand and keep your family safe from botulism.
We know how important our traditional native foods are, but we must be very careful in how we prepare our traditional native foods. If people want to continue eating their fermented heads, they need not to use any plastic to help ferment them. Using the traditional hole in the ground is better, but there's still always the possibility that a botulism can infect that head. So I would recommend that people boil their foods for a minimum of 10 minutes. I guess I would say that people need to be very, very careful when they're eating their fermented native foods. And if they have any symptoms at all, they need to see a healthcare provider very quickly and not wait at home.
Ay, 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 ay.